Tulsi Gabbard has weighed in on Kyle Rittenhouse's trial. And while it's very unlikely that he will be convicted of the homicide charges against him due to his defense of using self-defense in the shootings in Kenosha, Wisconsin, what I'm also noticing is that people like Tulsi Gabbard are trying to use his unlikeliness of getting convicted as something to clear his record of any wrongdoing, of any type of bad behavior altogether. And so there's the criminal trial, right? And then there's also Kyle Rittenhouse as a person. And he is not dealing with charges based on his association with white supremacists or who he is as a person. In this country, you can legally be a white supremacist, unfortunately, right? And so she says this, and I think it's fascinating. Pay close attention to the wording too. With no evidence, mainstream media and Antifa-loving politicians
come on,
immediately labeled Rittenhouse a white supremacist terrorist. It's obvious now that he was just a foolish kid who felt he needed to protect people and the community from rioters and arsonists because the government failed to do so. Now, I will agree with one thing. It's very clear that both Rittenhouse and members of militia groups that showed up during the protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin, did not believe that law enforcement would be able to handle the job or to do the job appropriately, which is why they showed up armed to carry out vigilante justice. That's why they were there, okay? Now, to say that there's no evidence that Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist or has ties to white supremacists, I think is a little bit ridiculous. And I wanna provide the evidence for that, okay? So first off, prior to the shootings happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin last year, he was posting on social media, as most people do, and his posts are relevant, especially when you consider the climate in the country at the time and when you consider the number of police shootings that were taking place that led to the deaths of unarmed African Americans. Now, the public posts on Rittenhouse's Facebook are almost entirely dedicated to honoring police with Blue Lives Matter graphics, which of course is a response to Black Lives Matter, photos of officers killed in the line of duty, and the thin blue line flag associated with support for law enforcement. Now look, why is that relevant? Because when you think about cases like Philando Castile, who had a license to carry and told the cop during a routine traffic stop, hey, I have a licensed gun in the glove compartment, he was shot and killed immediately, no questions asked. Why did that happen? When you see cases like Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old who was playing with a toy gun at a park, he was shot by a cop and killed within 2 seconds of the cop showing up. Cop didn't even get out of his car. Showed up, boom, 12-year-old gone, dead. To see those videos of innocent black people getting shot and killed and respond to Black Lives Matter with Blue Lives Matter, it sends a message. But I'm not done yet. Rittenhouse attended a Trump rally in Des Moines, sitting in the front row and posting a TikTok video from the January 30th event. BuzzFeed News reported at the time. The video, which has since been deleted, appeared to match C-SPAN footage of Rittenhouse standing just to the left of the lectern. And look, we know what those Trump rallies were like. We know what was appealing about Donald Trump among the right-wing electorate. So do with that information what you will. But there's one other thing I wanna note in response to Tulsi Gabbard saying, with no evidence. There was security footage obtained from a Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin bar. This is after Rittenhouse had been bailed out of prison. And he was there with Proud Boys members. And there he is, here's a screenshot of the security footage showing him making that hand gesture that white supremacists tend to make. The video taken 2 weeks before, and then there's other stuff which I'll get to in just a second. Let's take that down because I want to give more context before we get to that graphic. But yes, this graphic of him making that hand gesture, like we all know what that is. We know that right-wingers and white supremacists use it to make a point. And so like to say there's no evidence, I think is ridiculous. Now, anyway, you go ahead, Cenk.
So look, Rittenhouse, like all the militia members there, went there because they couldn't wait to shoot people. You have no business being vigilante as going and saying, oh, well, Blue Lives Matter, I support the cops completely, but they're complete losers who can't do the job. So I'm gonna have to step in and do their job for them because they're incompetent, right? Wait, which one is it? Oh, you only like cops when they're shooting black people. I get it, right? And then all of a sudden, he tried to surrender to the cops. They wouldn't even take it. They're like, oh, you're a white killer, a right winger? Oh, go on back home. Who cares? Free to go. Anyways, you guys know all that. That's not the interesting part of the story. The interesting part of the story is that Tulsi Gabbard is doing very standard right-wing talking points, right?
And propaganda, yeah.
Antifa-loving politicians? Wait, that's a reference to the most progressive members of Congress. Just a little while ago, she was pretending to be one of the most progressive members of Congress. She ran where in the beginning she was saying that she was mainly to the left of Bernie Sanders. And she would often vote with the squad, etc. Now all of a sudden, here comes a paycheck and Tulsi Gabbard's like, Antifa-loving politicians, can you believe the left? And the Democrats, what they're doing with race is atrocious.
Well, I mean, look, it's interesting because she's accusing people of smearing Rittenhouse as a white supremacist. And in that same argument, she is smearing politicians as Antifa loving. So let's get specific. Which politicians exactly are Antifa loving, and what evidence do you have that they love Antifa or have defended Antifa? And I'm curious, right? Because look, we've covered a lot of the trial, the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. I've very clearly stated that based on the evidence that we've seen, the self-defense argument seems sound, right? We'll see how the trial plays out, but that's the way it's looking. It is what it is, those are the facts. But I am very curious, if the tables were turned and it was a pro-Trump, anti-mask rally or protest, and armed members of Antifa showed up, and then there was some sort of tussle where an Antifa member shot and killed a Trump supporter, and you look at video and it's similar to what we saw with the Kyle Rittenhouse video, would we get similar reactions?
No, look, everybody knows the answer. If it could be Antifa, if black militants went into the middle of an anti-vax protest or any right-wing protest, heavily armed, and then one of the anti-vax guys pushed them, and then they started killing them, right? Oh, the black guys are going to be celebrated as heroes in the right wing for killing right-wingers because they were using their Second Amendment rights and they were just doing self-defense? Get out of here, nobody thinks that. You know that, you're all liars. But on top of that, hey, let's take your own so-called principles and logic, right? So Kyle Rittenhouse, man, look, if he gets acquitted, that means he was innocent and a wonderful guy who's been smeared, right? I got news for you, O.J. Simpson was also acquitted. So if that's your logic, then you all owe OJ a giant apology. It turns out being acquitted means you're a wonderful human being who was innocent of everything. No, it just means in reality that they didn't have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't mean that you did something morally correct. Kyle Rittenhouse still went there with terrible intent, with heavily armed, and wound up killing 2 people that would be alive today if it wasn't for goddamn Rittenhouse.
And I want to just look, Cenk said something that was pretty harsh in this video, right? They couldn't wait to get there with their guns. They couldn't wait to shoot people.
100%.
Hold on. But I want to, if you think that's too harsh, I just want you to consider this. Now, this is information, this is evidence that was considered inadmissible in court during the Rittenhouse case. But I think it is relevant to understand some of Rittenhouse's intentions here. So video taken 2 weeks before the Kenosha shooting showed Rittenhouse talking about an AR rifle and wanting to shoot people he allegedly thought were looting a CVS store. Prosecutors said the video shows that he eagerly made assumptions about the intentions of others, even though he knew absolutely nothing about what was going on. The video also demonstrates that the defendant fervently sought to insert himself as an armed vigilante into situations that had nothing to do with him, court documents allege.
Okay, the judge in this case is an absolute joke, so that's not admissible. But wait a minute, if I'm the family members of the people who were killed, you're telling me we can't tell the jury deciding that he bragged about how he intended to kill people with his weapon, and then he killed people with his weapon just like he intended, and he's on the record as saying. No, you can't admit that. All right, can we at least call the people who were killed victims? No, you cannot call them victims. You must call them arsonists or looters or rioters. There's no evidence indicating any of them were arsonists, looters, or rioters. The judge might as well hide Rittenhouse under his robe. Like, are you okay? Are you okay, my beloved right-wing son? Don't worry, I'll let you kill anybody. Anyway, look, guys, like Anna said, it's a complicated and nuanced case, and there is a legitimate, I don't know how I would vote on the jury. But I get that there's a legitimate self-defense argument here, especially in regards to the guy who didn't die, who got shot in the arm because he was carrying a weapon
and pointing at it.
And it appears pointing at Rittenhouse. But another guy had a skateboard, another guy who was killed, another guy who was killed had a plastic bag. So, okay, you could say, oh yeah, anybody with a plastic bag should be murdered if they throw it at me. You're right-wingers, you probably do believe that. Anything that's a mild threat, that's an excuse to murder people, you probably love. That's why Rittenhouse is your hero. But let's go to Tulsi, because the next set of lies she's gonna tell shows you how pathetic she has become. Pathetic. This is on Tucker Carlson's show. And look at her blame the racial issues on Democrats, but not her beloved right-wingers. Go ahead.
Hold on. Before we get to Tucker, because there are two videos I want to get to. Listen, we need to get to the first clip where she's talking about whether Rittenhouse should have been prosecuted in the first place. And then I'm gonna explain why, yes, he should have been prosecuted. Let's watch.
The prosecutor in this Rittenhouse trial obviously did not do his due diligence before making the decision to prosecute. This tragedy never would have happened if the government had simply carried out its responsibilities to protect the safety, lives, and property of innocent people.
Okay, so let me remind everyone that Rittenhouse is facing 6 charges, okay? One of those charges is possession of an illegal weapon, and that's the gun that he had, the AR-15 that was purchased for him by a friend in Wisconsin. Now, he was 17 at the time. He could not legally be in possession of that gun because of his age. He admitted just recently on the stand that yes, I was in possession of an illegal gun. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of what he said. He confessed to that. So is Tulsi Gabbard saying that if you're in possession of an illegal weapon, you shouldn't face any prosecution, you shouldn't face any consequences? The other issue is, look, whether you like it or not, 2 individuals are gone, they're dead. And their families deserve to know what happened. And to not prosecute and to not investigate and to not figure out what went down that day, I think it's a miscarriage of justice. So if he's cleared of the homicide charges, and it looks like that's likely to happen, at least we know that there was a trial, evidence was presented, everyone can look at that evidence, and this is how we carry out justice in the country. To say like he shouldn't have been prosecuted at all is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I have only one comment about that part. She said, if the government had just done their jobs, poor Kyle Rittenhouse wouldn't have had to go there and shoot people. What do you mean by the government? Whose job is it to protect the security of people? It's the police. Why don't you say it that way then? Notice how she's using right-wing talking points, but actually blaming the cops. But she won't say the cops because then she'll lose her right-wing audience and her right-wing funding.
That's right. And then she went on Tucker Carlson, of course, to make a point about what Democrats do that she has a problem with. Let's watch.
The problem that we have now is leaders who are so willing to manipulate the American people to further their own selfish political interests or money or power or whatever it is. And we see this very clearly in how everything in our country is being racialized. That this is an intentional strategy to tear us apart based on the color of our skin because they think that there's some political gain to be had from it. And they don't care at all about the destruction that they leave in their wake. And this is what we as voters need to reject and choose leaders who do put the American people in our country first, who share that objective from both political parties.
Yeah, the example you just gave, which is at the center of so much of the rhetoric, is such an obvious dead end. It's the end point of that is violence and division. Everyone can tell.
Now, understand that Tulsi Gabbard is on Tucker Carlson's show, the guy who refers to immigrants as filthy. Right, the guy who makes race issues the centerpiece of his programming, and not in a positive way to better the country, but to literally rip the country apart by racial lines, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, look, she knows what she's doing. And really, do we have to explain what's really going on here? I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, so she said there that the Democrats are racializing the country. She went on to say it again after Tucker went and said that they're the ones, Democrats are the ones sowing division in this country. Now look, if you want to say, hey, corporate Democrats play identity politics and they use it as cover for actually helping their donors while we're distracted by culture war issues.
That would be true.
That we would agree with that, right? But if you pretend like it's just Democrats doing it and the most left Democrats, i.e. progressives, right? But that the Republicans are not doing it, that the guy whose show you're on, that Tucker Carlson is not doing it, and it is the left's fault that we're being driven apart and divided on racial issues. That is so beyond absurd.
What's their shiny little object right now for the Republican Party? What's their shiny little distraction?
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory, huh?
And then there's Tulsi doing the talking point about how the Democrats are the problem on the race issue. If black people and minorities and Muslims would just shut up and know their role, that Tucker has told them, they will not replace us Americans, Tulsi says. Okay, so she's gone.
She was gone from the very beginning.
No, look, Anna, you called out before anybody else realized that there's still some, I feel so sad for them. People who think they're on the left, who got totally catfished into or fish hooked into.
No, catfished is good.
Oh, catfished, okay.
Or fish hooked, either one works, but.
Oh, they're like, no.
She does yoga videos. And she goes surfing.
Yeah, and
total progressive.
Total, yeah. And she's, she's not for Medicare for all anymore. And she's for racializing things where we blame minorities. But she's more left, is she? Is she? Okay, anyways, the jury's in. Tulsi Gabbard is now officially a right winger, and not because she had any change of heart or she can point to policy differences or anything. No, she's getting paid by Rumble. She's trying to be a Fox News contributor. It's the saddest, most pathetic ending to a career. Only equaled by Glenn Greenwald, who's kissing her ass all over social media. He took that clip and said, I don't understand what's anything objectionable about what Tulsi's saying. Oh, Glenn, what an embarrassing, humiliating end to your career. You needed the Rumble money? That's what you needed? Pathetic. You can't tell that Tucker Carlson, your beloved friend Tucker Carlson, is driving racial division in this country. You missed that? Look, Dumbledore might have missed it. Dave Rubin hasn't had a thought in his mind. Ever. You could make a defense for them that they're too stupid to understand. You can't make that defense for Glenn Greenwald. He knows what he's doing. It's the epitome of pathetic and humiliating. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.